The first time I realized something was seriously wrong, there was a man grilling hot dogs on my patio. Not a friend, not a neighbor I recognized, just some random guy wearing my apron like he owned the place, flipping hot dogs and casually asking me if I had Dijon mustard. Behind him, 3 kids were screaming with laughter as they cannonballed into my pool. A woman I'd never seen before was using my garden hose to rinse mud off her dog. And somewhere near the fence, a silver Honda Civic sat parked directly on my lawn, my actual lawn, the one I spent half my Saturdays trying to keep alive. For a moment, I just stood there staring. You ever have one of those moments where your brain refuses to process what your eyes are seeing? Like the world suddenly glitched? That's exactly what it felt like. Because this wasn't a park. This wasn't community land. This was my backyard, the one I bought, fenced, maintained, and paid property taxes on. And yet here were 20 strangers acting like they had every right to be there. Then I saw her. Karen Thompson. Khaki capris. Oversized sunglasses. Clipboard tucked under one arm, like she was the commander of a suburban army. She was walking around my yard handing out paper plates and directing people toward the cooler like she was hosting the event. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate. And if Karen wanted a war, she had just started one. Now I wish I could tell you this whole thing came out of nowhere, but the truth is the warning signs were there from the beginning. 3 months earlier, I had moved into Cascadia Hills, a quiet cul-de-sac tucked against a greenbelt. Exactly the kind of place I'd been looking for. I work remotely as a software engineer, which means most of my days are spent solving problems for people in 3 different time zones while wearing pajama pants. All I really wanted was peace-good Wi-Fi, maybe a grill, and a hammock in the yard. This house had all of it. Then Karen showed up. She knocked on my door during my first week with what she called a welcome packet. 10 pages of HOA rules. Some of them made sense, things about trash pickup days and parking limits. But others felt strange. Lawn decorations could not exceed 4 inches in height. Outdoor furniture had to maintain a harmonious aesthetic tone. Wind chimes were discouraged because they created acoustic clutter. I remember smiling politely while flipping through it, thinking, wow, this woman takes this neighborhood way too seriously. What I didn't realize yet was that Karen wasn't just enthusiastic about rules. She lived for them. Within 2 weeks, she had already left me 3 notes. One about my trash bins being visible from the street. One about my grill smoke drifting across the fence. And one about my mailbox leaning slightly. But I ignored it, because sometimes the easiest way to deal with difficult people is simply not to engage. That strategy worked, until the day my backyard turned into a public picnic. When a man at the grill told me Karen had said this was community green space, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was yelling. I walked straight over to her. Karen, I said carefully, why are there strangers in my backyard? She looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Oh, Jake, she said, waving her clipboard casually, this area is marked as shared space on the HOA's original map. I told her the city property records clearly showed the yard as part of my lot. She shrugged. Well, maps can be misleading. And you weren't using it anyway. That sentence stuck with me. You weren't using it anyway. It told me everything I needed to know about Karen. To her, ownership didn't matter. Authority did. If she decided something belonged to the community, then in her mind it did. That night, I sat on my patio after everyone finally left. The yard still smelled like grilled corn and cheap beer. I could have called a lawyer. I could have filed complaints with the city. But those solutions would take months. And honestly, I wanted something faster. Something that would make a point. That's when I remembered my cousin Tank. Tank, real name Thomas, but nobody calls him that, was getting married. He was also the chaplain for a biker club called the Southern Sons. Big guys, loud bikes, leather jackets, the kind of group most quiet suburbs aren't prepared for. They had been struggling to find a wedding venue. Apparently, a lot of places get nervous when 50 motorcycles show up. So I called him. Tank, I said, how would you like to have your wedding in my backyard? There was silence on the line. Then a shout, so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Within days, my quiet yard transformed. Lights hanging from trees. A stage for live music. Decorations Darla, Tank's fiancée, had designed herself. Darla was an event planner, and the moment she heard the backstory, she got excited. "Oh," she said, "we're going to make this unforgettable." Word spread through the neighborhood. Some people were curious. Some were cautious. But a surprising number of neighbors were excited. Because once people started talking stories about Karen started surfacing. Apparently, she had been rerouting walking paths across people's driveways. Once she unlocked someone's gate for a contractor without permission. She had even forced a kid to shut down a lemonade stand because it wasn't HOA approved. The more people talked, the clearer something became. Karen hadn't been keeping order. She had been controlling everyone, which made what happened next even better. The morning of the wedding started with the sound of engines. Deep, rolling thunder as motorcycles entered the street one by one. Neighbors came outside, holding coffee mugs. Kids stared wide-eyed. Even the older couples brought chairs to watch. I knew my backyard looked like a festival. Food trucks, music, laughter. The ceremony itself was surprisingly beautiful. Tank promised to always carry extra fuel, emotionally and literally. Darla promised to never complain about oil stains on the driveway. There were tears, applause, and cheering when they kissed. But Karen wasn't finished. Right in the middle of the reception, the power suddenly went out. Music stopped. Lights died. Confused voices filled the yard. I ran around the side of the house, and there she was, standing beside the electrical box with a crowbar. "I warned you," she said smugly. Unfortunately for Karen, the fire marshal had been invited to the wedding. He stepped forward slowly. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "did you tamper with that electrical box?" She tried to explain, but the crowbar in her hand made the situation pretty clear. Police were called, and for the first time since I'd met her, Karen had nothing to say. The generator kicked in minutes later. Lights came back on. The band resumed playing. And that night, the sky exploded with fireworks. Real fireworks. Red and silver bursts lighting up the entire neighborhood. The crowd cheered. Even the officers stayed to watch. Karen stood across the street, holding a garden hose like she might try something else, but this time nobody was listening to her. Because something had changed. People had seen the truth. At the next HOA meeting, several residents brought up Karen's behavior. Stories poured out. Complaints that had been ignored for years. When the vote came to replace the HOA president, it passed overwhelmingly. The new president? Darla, the biker bride. Within weeks, half the ridiculous rules disappeared. Decorative frogs were allowed again. Inflatable holiday decorations returned. Neighbors started hosting cookouts and movie nights. The place finally felt like a real neighborhood. Karen lasted about a month after that. Then one day, a moving truck appeared. By nightfall, she was gone. No goodbye. Just a note on the community board that read, "Some people don't appreciate order." Someone wrote underneath it, "Some people don't appreciate tyrants." And standing there reading that, I realized something. Most bullies survive because everyone stays quiet. But the moment people stop being afraid, their power disappears. Karen thought authority meant control. But real communities don't work that way. They work because people respect each other. Because neighbors talk. Because nobody gets to claim someone else's backyard just because they feel like it. And sometimes the best way to remind someone of that is to throw the loudest biker wedding the neighborhood has ever seen. So now I'm curious. If someone tried to take control of your property the way Karen did, would you fight back quietly, or would you make sure the whole neighborhood remembered the day they picked the wrong backyard? Tell me what you would have done.